With a full month of data at our disposal, we can start to make even more informed week-to-week decisions. Today, we are continuing our love-hate series as we look into 3 players I'm trying to start everywhere and 3 players I'm trying to sit. But before we dig in, head over to 4for4.com, use promo code YouTube to get yourself 25% off any subscription plan. Start Dalton Kincaid. It's been slowly more consistent for Dalton Kincaid in the fantasy box score over the first 4 weeks of the season. Granted, anything would have been better than his 1.6 half PPR points to open the year, but he's followed that up with 5.3, 11.6, and 7.2 points in the following 3 weeks. While we certainly would have thought that the sophomore tight end would be on the field more in a post-Stephon Diggs world, I don't think there's anything to worry about quite yet. His 63.1% route participation ranks 21st in the league at the position, and is a bit alarming, but is almost identical to his 65.1% rate that he saw as a rookie. This issue certainly feels like it's going to resolve itself, particularly after a disastrous Week 4 loss in which the wide receiver room proved that they can't be depended on when playing in an obvious passing game script. Though Khalil Shakir can't shoulder much of the blame after playing through an ankle injury that might keep him out of Week 5, the rest of the room sure can. Mac Hollins was the second most targeted pass catcher in the game, coming down with one single 5-yard catch on those 6 targets. On the season, Hollins is now averaging 2.0 yards of separation, while neither Keon Coleman nor Marquez Valdez-Scantling are above 2.5. While Coleman wins in contested catch situations and did throughout his college years, it's not imperative that he gets a ton of room between himself and the defenders. For the rest of the wide receiver room, that's not necessarily the case. Kincaid should become more of a focal point of the offense moving forward. That's the case even more so if Shakir does end up missing Week 5. Start Justice Hill. While I'm not suggesting that you bench a capable RB2 for Justice Hill this weekend, I do believe he's an interesting flex option or a decent play for managers who have been hit by this early bye week. While the Bengals offensive line will be returning both defensive end Myles Murphy and defensive tackle McKinley Jackson in the coming weeks, neither one of them look like they'll be able to impact the game this week, which means Derrick Henry and Justice Hill and Lamar Jackson will have an incredible matchup ahead of them. Left tackle Ronnie Stanley has returned to elite play through the first 4 weeks of the season, and most importantly, he hasn't missed a single snap of action, which has been very rare over the last half-decade. His play has been a catalyst in the Ravens' 3.13 running back yards before contact, the second highest mark in the league. Doesn't seem fair to have Henry running behind a line that can clear huge swaths of land before he's even touched, but fantasy managers who roster him certainly won't complain. Sportsbooks expect the Bengals to put up plenty of fight when they have the ball, pushing the total up to 50.5, the highest of the week. Hill has shown a floor by scoring 10.6 half PPR points in weeks 2 and 3, and his ceiling of 27.1 points in weeks 1 and 4, which are directly correlated to his target total. If Cincinnati pushes Baltimore into a passing game script, both Henry and Justice Hill could end up with great fantasy performances. Start Michael Pittman Jr. This is a tough spot this week as we really want to exploit this matchup, but we don't know yet who will be throwing the ball for the Colts. The difference between Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco could be upwards of 15 pass attempts, which is obviously impactful when considering which, if any, Colts wide receivers we'd like to throw into our lineups. Regardless, this profiles as either a huge bounce-back situation for Richardson or a week where both Josh Downs and Michael Pittman can be considered strong wide receiver 2s with Flacco. The Jaguars' defense not only ranks dead last in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed to both quarterbacks and wide receivers, but they also rank 24th in pressure rate and 31st in adjusted sack rate. These numbers have all come with stud pass rusher Josh Hines Allen in the lineup, who is currently in the concussion protocol and questionable for Week 5. Both Pittman and Downs can be considered respective wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 4 this week, but both get a massive boost if Flacco is out there dropping back 40-plus times, especially if Jonathan Taylor ends up missing this game. Sit the Raiders running backs. The Raiders, who already rank in the bottom 6th in both adjusted sack rate and adjusted line yards, came out of Week 4 with further bad news pertaining to their offense. Not only did Devontae Adams request a trade, but they've also lost right guard Dylan Parham with an Achilles injury that may impact his availability in Week 5. Obviously, Adams, who missed Week 4 with a hamstring injury and looks like he's going to miss Week 5 with that same injury, is more important to the offense as a whole, but the Raiders' offensive line was already reeling in the first month of the season. They don't need any more hiccups. I know many of us are dealing with bye weeks for Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, and many other viable running backs here in Week 5, but try to avoid both Alexander Mattison and Zamir White at all costs. It looks like Madison will soon, if he hasn't already, take over lead back duties for White, who lost another fumble and finished week 4 under 3 yards per carry yet again. But this isn't the week to worry about that, as the Broncos defense has been very good through the first 4 weeks of the season. Not only should everyone not named Brock Bowers remain on fantasy benches, but the Broncos defense should be started anywhere they're available. Sit Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison returned to the week 4 lineup after injuring his ankle in week 1 and went on to score 21.4 half PPR points. So why in the world are we sitting him? Well, Addison scored one of his touchdowns on his second career rush attempt. On his second score, he had an easy pitch and catch when the quarterback got caught in no man's land between routes and left Addison wide open. Now, I think he's going to score more touchdowns this year, possibly even of the easy variety, but his week 4 performance was a bit fluky, and now he gets a much more difficult Jets secondary. Though it has been against 2 of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league right now, the Jets amazingly held the Patriots and Broncos to 180 yards passing combined. Of their 4 games, here are the leading receivers in each. Juwan Jennings had 64 yards on 5 targets. Calvin Ridley had 77 yards on 6 targets. Demario Douglas got to 69 yards on 7 targets. And Courtland Sutton had 60 yards on 9 targets. Addison is a better talent than in one of those names, but he also happens to share the field with Justin Jefferson. If anyone is going to be force-fed the ball in this type of situation, it is Jefferson, not Jordan Addison. But there are better days ahead, with the Vikings getting the Lions, Rams, Colts, and Jaguars out of their Week 6 bye. If Addison puts up a clunker here in Week 5, he should be a trade target heading into this group of soft matchups. Sit Jaylen Waddle. I don't know that anyone outside of Miami would consider Tua a locked-in top 10 quarterback, but for the second time in 3 years, we've seen the offense go down the drain when he's not on the field. In a 6-game sample with the likes of Teddy Bridgewater, Skylar Thompson, Tim Boyle, and now Tyler Huntley, things have been awful for fantasy purposes. In a sample size large enough for a third of an entire season, the Dolphins have averaged 13.3 points and 213.8 passing yards. Hill has popped up for some very usable weeks in the non-Tua sample. The same can't necessarily be said for Jaylen Waddle. They both get hit hard, but Waddle has been mostly a near blank outside of week 6 of the 2022 season when he hit 129 yards on 6 catches. Including that big game, Waddle has a respectable 4.16 catches per game, but only 51.6 yards, eclipsing 60 on only that aforementioned boom game. It's hard to see how things are going to be different in Week 5 after the team just asked Tyler Huntley to drop back only 28 times in a game they were losing. Out of the 47 snaps they were trailing in Week 4, they maintained a 45 to 55% pass-to-rush ratio. Only 2 teams who were trailing for more than 10 offensive snaps passed the ball less, the Raiders and the Broncos. And we're already well aware of their quarterback situations. I can't in good conscience tell you to bench Tyreek or Devon Achane, but we probably have to draw the line at Jaylen Waddle, at least for this week.